Greetings, brethren. House Donkey here, and I am currently in the process of basing my undead that I still have remaining for my Oathmark project. And somebody in the comments asked if I could show a tutorial on how I do the basing for my Oathmark figures. And sure, absolutely, I can do that. However, I am incredibly... I hate editing so much that I would rather do it this way. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second, because this is all going to be one take. And we'll see how it goes. I hope it doesn't go on for too long. So, step number one is I completely paint the miniature. In the case of Oathmark, I actually do glue the plastic figures to the bases before painting. In the case of metal figures, I have them on bottle caps, because they're easier to hold that way. And then once they're finished painting, I varnish them and then I glue them to the green bases. Right, so the first thing I do is I glue on some large rocks. These are from the forest. I pick them up every now and then, like a bag of them, and then I wash them at home and use them for basing and terrain building and such. Because, as I've said several times, I think there's nothing that looks more like a rock than an actual rock. And we're just going to glue that on with some super glue. Put that on there. And then we're going to put that to dry. When it comes to this basing technique, it has a lot of steps, which makes it much better of a technique for when you have a lot of bases to do at once. I like to do at least 20. But I found that doing around 40 to 50 bases is somewhat the sweet spot, because then with most of the steps you can advance to the next one once you've finished the last. Yeah, after you put all the rocks on, you will have to let them dry a little bit, because the super glue might still be a little bit wet and you want it to completely cure before you go to the next step, because otherwise you'll get white dust, which we don't want. So, I have the next one here. This one already had the stones glued on. Right there. I had to use several smaller ones because I'm actually running out of stones, so I'm going to have to get some new ones. And then next step is going to be AK Interactive's Terrain's Muddy Ground, which I highly recommend. It's an excellent an excellent texture paint. That also isn't too expensive, because I think Games Workshop texture paint is way too expensive. This comes in, I think it's 50 milliliters, and you can see RRP is £10. I think I paid €8 for it or something like that. And it's definitely worth it. All right. Oh yeah, I have two lids because this is my second one. You should definitely cover the pot with cling wrap or something like that to make sure that it doesn't dry out, because over time, because it's such a big pot, it will definitely dry out if you just leave it as is. And then we're just going to put this on. I do not use filler on my Oathmark collection to smooth out the edge around the integrated base. I only use filler if that's the only thing I use. If I'm using texture paint of any sorts, I don't bother with filler, because I just don't see the point. And I'll show you why in one of the later steps, because we're basically just going to hide it. I'm just going to put this on all over the base. Not too thick, because we don't want it to be incredibly lumpy. We still want the tufts to stick later. So we're going to be generous around the lipped base, the integrated base, but we don't have to worry about it too much. It's still going to show afterwards, but it won't matter. Let's see. Oh, I need to be a bit more in the camera. It's difficult because the little nub at the back is stabbing me in the chest. Still haven't quite figured out a better way to do this. Alright. Alright, that's that stuff on. Once you put that on all of them, I would also then give them a little bit to completely cure, because with the next step, you're just not gonna catch up. This is gonna take about an hour and a half to 2 hours to completely cure this stuff. Yeah, but it is really heavy duty structure paint, and then obviously you also have to clean the sides so that they rank up again perfectly. So you can use your fingers or a tool, it doesn't really matter, or a little cloth. All right, and then once that's dry, it's gonna look like this. I'm just gonna quickly put the muddy ground aside, swap the lids again. And then the next step, whoop, got a bunch of stuff on my fingers. Great. All right, the next step is gonna be Vallejo Model Colors Light Gray. I'm not going to need too much. Obviously, well, that's already way too much. And we're just going to paint the rocks that we have on the base. Let's see if this can get focus. There we go. We're just going to paint these gray. Just flat. If it spills over a bit, that doesn't really matter either. Just paint them all over. On this one, it's just 3 small ones in this corner of the base, I think. Yeah. And as you can see, when the texture paint is dry, you can definitely see the outline of the integrated base again. It has already a little bit, it's gotten diminished a little bit, except for here. It's pretty harsh on this side. But again, it won't matter at the end. We'll hide it. All right. And then when that's done, we painted all the rocks gray. We are going to, there it is. We're going to wash over the whole base. And because this is just a base wash, and at the end you're not really going to see much of the wash at all, it's just there for some really deep recess shadow. This is actually the excellent opportunity to use your homemade washes, because it really doesn't matter too much. But I don't want to get them out, I have to mix them up. It's just easier to use a little bit of Agrax Earthshade now. Otherwise I would use my, when I do a big batch, I use my own homemade shade, which is made with the recipe from Luke's APS. Alright, and you just put that all over, including the rocks. Can be pretty liberal, doesn't matter too much. Because we're just trying to get some depth into the muddy ground. Alright, good enough, as you can see. Actually pull the light a bit further. You can see, shade is all over. And then once it dries, it's going to look like this. It's going to be rather dark. That's okay. That's what we want. Because you really want those deep recess shadows on the base. Okay, next comes the dry brushing, and we're going to dry brush the earth part of the base first with flat earth, also Vallejo model color. My trusty dry brush. Oh, I put them in the gray. Great. Okay. Yeah, and we're just gonna go pretty heavily over the whole. I put the dry brush in the gray as well. Lovely. I know you're not supposed to wash your dry brushes out and then immediately reuse them, but again, because this is basing, yeah, I don't really care that much. If I was going to paint miniatures, I might worry a bit more, but roughly washing it out and drying it will be good enough. All right, we go over the whole base, over all the parts that are earth, avoiding the rocks if there are any on them. On this one I didn't put any rocks, but now you can see the integrated base is popping out a lot. But again, it won't matter at the end. They all looked like this, and I'll show you an example at the end so you can see that it really doesn't matter too much. After they're dry brushed with flat earth, they're going to look like this. And we're going to use our next dry brush color. We're going to go over the earth with 2 different colors. If I still have any in here. Come on. It's not empty, I know. There we go. And this is Vallejo model color Iraqi sand, which is sort of a pretty dark beige. And we are just going to go over it lightly. We just want a light sort of highlight dry brush. This also helps you if you smudged any of the brown onto the skeleton. In this case, then you can sort of brighten that back up. And on other figures, it also just kind of looks dusty when you go over it with this after the brown. So not too big a deal either. And again, avoiding the rocks as much as possible. If a bit gets on the rocks, that doesn't matter, but just mostly try to avoid them. Alright, now we're looking like this. And next we're going to go back to the original light gray, which is going to be a light enough dry brush now that we washed the rocks with Agrax Earthshade. And you can see I smudged on them a bit, but it really doesn't matter too much. And then we're just going to pick out the rocks again with light gray. There we go. And then for the next step, I'm going to use a smaller dry brush. And I kind of eyeball this next step. I'm sure if you have a lighter gray, you can just use that, but I don't. So I'm just adding some white to the light gray. And gonna straight mix that on the palette. And then dry brush that on. We're just going to do a very, very light sort of highlighting dry brush. Sort of, we want to get all the edges. So have it a bit lighter on the top. There we go. That's where we want to be. And that's all the painting we're going to do to the base. It looks like a lot, but I think the drying time for me is what takes the most time. Once you're through that, the dry brushing is actually pretty simple and goes pretty quick. Alright, and then once it's dry brushed in those steps, we are actually done with the painting. Wash out the brush, because I do actually need to reuse these in workable condition. Because I'm going to have to catch up with all these bases that I didn't do later. Because that's what I meant with I'm too lazy to edit. I would rather just do this live and then catch up with hobby time to the rest of the miniatures than edit it together during the actual process. Okay, next we're going to put on tufts. I don't have a lot left, but that's fine. Because I'm going to switch entirely to my own tufts very soon. I'm really just using up whatever else I still have. These are self-adhesive. I like to still use a little bit of PVA anyway, because, well, I don't really trust the self-adhesive stuff too much. I worry that eventually it'll lose its strength. Clean the tuft up a little bit. Just gonna get a little bit of PVA glue, and I aim for about 2 to 3 tufts on each base. Before I use different colors for my goblins and such, but it doesn't really matter in the end, because it just kind of blends together anyway if it's all the same technique. Actually, I think he's good like that. Yeah, because he has the rocks. I don't think we need another one. So yeah, whoa. Drop him in the paint. Excellent. All right, he's fine. Okay. And then once all the tufts are on and dried, what we are going to do, just put the tufts aside. I showed this in another video. This is my sort of homemade moss mixture. And you can kind of preserve it with cling film a little bit. I made this this morning. And I did a video about this, but it is basically fine turf. So really finely cut green foam. which you can buy from various sources. And then it has PVA glue and water in it. And that's really all there is to it. Just gonna mix it up again a little bit. And then I'm gonna grab some of that. Come on. This part is actually kind of difficult with the camera in the way. I'm just gonna mush this on the base wherever there's no tufts and no rocks. A little bit there in the middle. Clean this up a little bit. It's a bit too much. Get it all looking nice and mossy. Once again, we're going to clean up the edges to make sure that there's nothing overhanging once it dries, because that's no good. Alright. That's how it looks. And then you have to leave that to dry again. That takes about, I want to say it takes about another 2 hours. So you'll probably be done with all of them long before that. And then you kind of have to wait again, because the next step is really, really simple. And right, this is what it looks like now, the base. And as you can see, we don't really see the integrated base anymore. With putting on tufts and with the moss mixture, we've pretty much just hidden it away, and it just looks pretty natural now. I can look through them and see if there's any one where I didn't hide it perfectly. Yeah, this one, I guess. I didn't hide it perfectly on this one. As you can see, there's still a little bit of the integrated base ridge at the front, but for the most part, it disappeared. And if you don't put any emphasis or attention to this, then nobody's going to notice that. Especially when they're ranked up, who cares, right? So that's why I don't use the filler, because once all the stuff is on, it's kind of an unnecessary extra step that just costs a bunch of time. And well, I don't want to spend that extra time. All right, next steps we're all going to do on the same guy. Alright, we just need a little bit of the green. This is Golden Olive, again from Vallejo Model Color. And where's my tiny dry brush? There we go. It's the smallest dry brush I have. And this one is sort of a wet brush, so I don't take all the paint off the brush, because it's not really necessary, because the moss actually dries in a way where you kind of want a lot of paint on the brush for a dry brush, because otherwise it won't stick that nicely. And that's all we're doing. We're just putting some bright highlights on it, just to sort of give it texture, make it stand out again and not just be a green mass on the base. And that's it. That's the basing, pretty much complete. The basing is basically complete. Right. Right. Next step is the magnets. So I'm going to put a magnet on this guy. I'm using the same magnet foil, double magnet foil, that I showed in my Oathmark movement tray video. And just take off the foil from the self-adhesive. There we go. These aren't particularly new. As you can see, the glue isn't great around the edges anymore. I'm going to stick them on anyway, and if they fall off, then I go in later and super glue them back on. But I give these a chance. Although this batch has definitely let me down a bit. There's a lot that are falling off the bases, which is kind of annoying, but oh well. Right, and then once the magnets are on all the bases, I grab some Vallejo black, just regular old Vallejo Model Color black, which is my favorite black, and we can thin that down a little bit with water, because it is a very strong paint, which is exactly why I like it, although that might have been a bit too much water. Oh well, we'll deal with it. And then I just paint the rim of the base black. Let's see, can we get it a bit focused? There we go. With it being this thin, I might have to go over it twice to get a really nice black coat. But yeah, that's all there is to it. And that's how I do my Oathmark bases. And it is a lot of steps, but when you have a good chunk of them to do at the same time, you actually go through them quite quickly. Oh, okay, only 20 minutes, quote unquote. I was thinking it might take longer, but yeah, that's it. That's my bases. I hope you like them. I think they are pretty easy to do, and they're basically my sort of adaptation of what the sort of standard Games Workshop in-store basing was around the millennium when I was working there. Except that instead of structure paint, or texture paint, it was sand and glue, and then you painted that. But other than that, that's pretty much how they did it back then, and I still think it works really well for sort of fantasy style basing. I just added the moss to it, basically. All right, hope you enjoyed it. I'll be sure to show you the finished army when it is finished. I have to go through a lot of the steps that I just showed on all the ones that were for demonstration, but that's still better than editing. All right, hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye-bye. See you next time.